You never forget the first time you step over the line. That line you swore you'd never cross. The one you laughed off when you saw it in movies, thinking, that would never be me. But when it happens, it's not a grand revelation, not some sweeping moment of clarity. No, it's the heat creeping up your neck, the dull ache between your thighs, the rush of something forbidden that pulses through your veins, making your fingers tremble. And for me, it all started with a grocery run. It was a late afternoon in July, the kind of heat that clings to your skin like an unwanted touch. I had left the house in a hurry, slipping into a sundress that I barely remembered pulling out of the closet. My husband Jason was at work, as usual, predictable, steady, safe. I wasn't thinking about anything as I grabbed my purse and keys, the empty fridge pushing me out the door more than anything else. The grocery store was blissfully cool, the rush of air conditioning licking over my skin as I stepped inside. I ran through the usual aisles, tossing essentials into the cart, but I wasn't paying attention. My mind was restless, my body even more so. It had been months, maybe even longer, since I had felt truly desired. Jason and I had settled into a routine that left little room for passion, for heat, for the kind of moments that used to leave me breathless against our kitchen counter, or tangled in our bedsheets long past midnight. And then I saw him. The new grocery clerk was tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline sharp enough to make my thighs clench together instinctively. His hair was slightly tousled, like he had just run his fingers through it, and when he looked up at me from behind the register, something in my stomach tightened. He wasn't just handsome. He was the kind of man that made you forget your shopping list, forget why you even walked into the store in the first place. "Find everything okay?" His voice was deep, smooth. His name tag read Travis. I placed my items on the belt, my fingers brushing against a carton of strawberries, and I felt his eyes on me. Slow. Appreciative. "I think so," I said, the words coming out more breathy than I intended. His lips quirked in a knowing smirk, and something in the way he looked at me made my pulse quicken. He scanned the items, his hands steady, his movements deliberate. I wondered what those hands would feel like against my skin, how they'd move over my body, how they'd... "Card or cash?" I blinked, startled by how fast my mind had unraveled. I slid my card through the reader, my hands gripping the edge of the counter to keep them from shaking. When the receipt printed, Travis took an extra second to fold it, his fingers brushing against mine as he handed it over. A jolt of something sharp and electric shot up my arm. "Enjoy your evening," he murmured, his voice lower now, almost like a secret meant only for me. I swallowed hard. I should have just walked out, should have left without another word. But my body had already made the decision for me. "Actually," I said, my voice softer now, more daring than it had any right to be, "I think I forgot something." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't look surprised. "What's that?" I leaned in just enough for my shoulder to brush against his. "Maybe you can help me find it." He didn't answer right away, just looked at me, his eyes darkening with something I hadn't seen in a long time, something raw, something hungry. "Meet me in the back," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. 5 minutes. I walked away, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack through my ribs. Every step felt heavier, every breath shallower. I told myself I was just playing, that I'd turn around, that this was nothing but a tease, a fleeting moment that I'd let die before it turned into something real. But I didn't turn around. I found myself in the back aisle, my fingers trailing absently over the shelves as if I were actually looking for something. My whole body was tense, coiled, thrumming with anticipation. And then he was there. Travis didn't say a word at first, just stood close enough for me to feel the heat rolling off him. My breath hitched as his fingers brushed against my wrist, then moved up my arm, slow, deliberate. "I knew you'd wait," he murmured, and God help me, he was right. I pressed my back against the nearest shelf, feeling the cool metal dig into my skin as he stepped closer, his body barely touching mine, but enough to make every nerve in me stand on edge. My mind screamed at me to stop, to walk away, to remember that I had a husband at home who trusted me. But my body didn't care. The air between us was thick, charged with something I hadn't felt in years. His breath was warm against my cheek, his fingers tracing the bare skin of my arm, his scent wrapping around me. I clenched my fists, trying to regain control, but the second his lips hovered near my ear, I felt my resolve snap like a thread pulled too tight. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I couldn't. Instead, I tilted my chin up, just enough for my lips to brush against his. It wasn't a full kiss, not yet. It was an invitation, a challenge, a test to see how much further I was willing to go. His hands settled on my waist, firm, claiming, and when he finally closed the distance, his mouth pressing against mine, it felt like something inside me shattered and came alive all at once. I gasped into the kiss, my fingers twisting into his shirt, pulling him closer, needing more, needing something I couldn't even name. For the first time in years, I felt wanted, and I knew I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. The second I let my lips touch his, everything else melted away. My husband, my marriage, the life I had carefully built, all of it faded into the background as Travis pressed me back against the shelves, his hands gripping my waist, his body heat searing through the thin fabric of my dress. I shouldn't have been doing this. Every rational thought in my head told me to stop, to push him away, to remember the vows I had made years ago. But rationality had no place here, not with the way my skin burned beneath his touch, not with the way my heart pounded in my chest, desperate for something I had denied myself for far too long. His mouth moved over mine, hungry, demanding, as if he had been waiting for this moment just as much as I had. His fingers slid down my back, pressing me closer, and I let out a soft, breathless sound that I barely recognized as my own. "What are we doing?" I managed to whisper, though my hands were still tangled in his shirt, refusing to let go. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, his gaze dark with something between lust and danger. "Whatever you want." And that was the problem. I wanted this. I wanted him. I wanted to feel something real again, something raw and unapologetic and reckless. I had spent years being careful, being faithful, being good, and where had it gotten me? Stuck in a passionless marriage, invisible, untouched, aching for something I couldn't even name. I tilted my chin up, closing the distance again, and this time, when his lips met mine, there was no hesitation. His hands tightened on my hips, fingers digging into the fabric of my dress as if he wanted to tear it away right then and there. My body responded instantly, arching into him, my skin igniting with every touch, every kiss, every teasing brush of his tongue against mine. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I registered the sound of the store's speakers, the faint murmur of other shoppers on the other side of the aisle, but none of it mattered. The world outside didn't exist. There was only the heat between us, the way his hands traced the curves of my body like he had been dying to touch me from the moment we met. "Not here," he murmured against my lips, his breath warm and teasing. "Come with me." I nodded before I could think better of it, before reason could creep back in and ruin everything. He grabbed my hand, leading me quickly through the back of the store, past a door marked Employees Only. The rush of excitement, the sheer audacity of what I was doing, sent a thrill through me. I had never done anything like this, never even considered it, and yet here I was, following a man I barely knew into the back of a grocery store like a woman starved for something I had been denied for too long. The door shut behind us, and suddenly, we were alone. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension between us electric. The stockroom was dimly lit, filled with boxes and shelves, but I barely registered any of it because the second the door clicked shut, Travis was on me again. His hands found my waist, lifting me effortlessly onto a nearby crate, my legs wrapped around his hips instinctively, my body pressing against his as his mouth claimed mine with renewed hunger. There was something intoxicating about the way he touched me, like he knew exactly what I needed, exactly how to unravel me without a single word. I gasped as his lips trailed down my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin just beneath my ear. My fingers dug into his shoulders, my body trembling with anticipation. It had been so long since someone had made me feel this way. Wanted, desired, completely and utterly consumed. His hands slid beneath the hem of my dress, fingertips teasing against my thighs, and I let out a shaky breath. Every inch of me was on fire, aching for more, desperate to see how far we could take this. But then, just as his fingers reached the edge of my underwear, a sound outside the door made us both freeze. Footsteps. Travis pulled back slightly, his breathing heavy, his hand still gripping my hips. My heart pounded wildly, adrenaline surging through me as I realized how close we were to being caught. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but my body was still humming with need, still thrumming with the undeniable ache of unfinished desire. The footsteps faded, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then Travis let out a low chuckle, his breath hot against my skin. "That was close," he murmured, his hand still gripping me as if he wasn't ready to let go just yet. I exhaled shakily, my fingers still tangled in his shirt. "Too close." He leaned in, his lips brushing against my jawline. "We should probably stop." I knew he was right. I knew I should push him away, straighten my dress, and walk out of there like none of this had ever happened. But I couldn't. Instead, I tightened my legs around his waist, pulling him closer, my lips finding his again. "Not yet," I whispered. He groaned softly against my mouth, his grip tightening. "You're playing a dangerous game." I smiled against his lips. "I know." And God help me, I didn't care. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I couldn't name, something deeper than just desire. I should have pulled away. I should have untangled myself from him, fixed my dress, and walked out as if nothing had happened. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned into the heat of him, into the way his fingers dug into my waist like he couldn't bear to let go. Travis exhaled against my skin, his breath warm and teasing. "You really don't want to stop, do you?" I let out a breathless laugh, my hands still gripping his shoulders. "Do you?" His lips ghosted over my jawline, his fingers tightening. "No." The tension between us coiled even tighter, something wild and reckless, growing in the space where logic should have been. His hands moved lower, tracing the curve of my thighs, the edge of my dress rising with every touch. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it, could feel it against his chest as he pressed even closer. And then, just as his fingers skimmed beneath the fabric, the sound of voices outside the storeroom made us both freeze. Travis cursed under his breath, his grip shifting as he pulled back just enough to glance at the door. I barely had time to process what was happening before he stepped away completely, straightening his shirt and running a hand through his already tousled hair. "We have to be careful," he muttered, his voice still thick with want, but edged with something else now. Something cautious. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the ache still thrumming through me. He was right. We had almost been caught once, and I knew we couldn't risk it again. Still, the frustration curled in my stomach, hot and restless. I slid off the crate, adjusting my dress, trying to calm the heat in my body. "So what now?" Travis looked at me for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with something unreadable. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Give me your number," he said, his voice low. "We can't do this here, but I'm not done with you." A shiver ran down my spine at the intensity in his gaze. My fingers trembled slightly as I took his phone, typing in my number, my heart racing as I handed it back. He glanced at the screen, then tucked the phone away. "I'll text you." I nodded, feeling both exhilarated and slightly unsteady. This was real now. It wasn't just a stolen moment in the back of a grocery store. It was something that would continue, something that would pull me further from the life I had known, and deeper into whatever this was with him. Travis reached out, his fingers brushing against my wrist, the smallest of touches, but enough to send another jolt through me. Then, he stepped back, giving me one last look before turning toward the door. "Go first," he said. "I'll leave in a few minutes." I hesitated, my body still humming with the memory of his touch. Then, with a deep breath, I turned and walked toward the exit, my pulse still racing as I stepped back into the store. The cool air hit my flushed skin, grounding me slightly, but it did nothing to quiet the thoughts running wild in my mind. I finished my grocery run in a daze, barely registering the items I tossed into my cart. Every nerve in my body still felt alive, still tingling with the ghost of his touch. When I finally made it to the checkout, I avoided looking at the register where he had been before, not trusting myself to keep my expression neutral. By the time I got home, my phone vibrated in my purse. My heart leapt into my throat as I pulled it out, my fingers clenching around it as I read the message. "Travis, I haven't stopped thinking about you." A slow smile spread across my lips, anticipation coiling deep in my stomach. I sank onto the couch, staring at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. This was it, the moment where I could still turn back, still put a stop to whatever this was before it went too far. But I didn't want to stop. I typed my response, my pulse hammering as I hit send. "Me. Neither have I." The next message came almost immediately. "Travis. Tomorrow, meet me." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding, my body already responding to the thought of seeing him again. It was madness. It was dangerous. It was wrong. But God, I wanted it. Me. Tell me where. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but as I stared at the phone, waiting for his response, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't about to stop now. The rest of the night felt like a blur, but every second of it was burned into my skin, my mind, my very core. Travis left first, slipping through the door like a shadow, his movements controlled, effortless. I waited a full 5 minutes before stepping out into the cool air of the store, my pulse still racing, my hands trembling slightly as I pushed my cart toward the exit. I expected guilt to hit me the moment I walked out, but it didn't. Instead, there was something else. Something that felt a lot like exhilaration. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and I wanted more. I barely noticed the drive home, my thoughts tangled up in the memory of his touch, the heat of his breath against my neck, the way his hands had fit so perfectly against my body. When I finally pulled into the driveway, I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing. Jason's car was parked in its usual spot. The house was dark, quiet. When I stepped inside, the scent of him was there, familiar, warm, comforting. But it didn't stir me the way it used to. I moved through the motions, placing the groceries on the counter, checking my phone out of habit. A message. "Travis. I can't stop thinking about you. I need more." My breath hitched. I should have ignored it. I should have turned off my phone, walked upstairs, and climbed into bed beside my husband like a faithful wife. But instead, I felt my fingers move on their own. Me. "Tell me where." The response came quickly. "Travis. Tomorrow, noon, my place." I stared at the message for a long moment, my heart hammering. I was about to cross another line, a deeper one that would be even harder to come back from. But the thought of stopping, of never feeling his hands on me again, of never tasting that kind of reckless passion, was unbearable. I typed a single word and hit send. Me. Yes. Sleep was impossible. My mind wouldn't shut off, replaying every moment in the back of that grocery store, my body still aching from how abruptly we had stopped. I lay there in the dark, Jason's steady breathing beside me, and I knew I was too far gone. There was no turning back now. Morning came too fast, and yet, not fast enough. Jason kissed me on his way out the door, his lips brushing against mine in a way that felt like routine, more than affection. "I'll be home late. Work's a mess," he muttered, grabbing his briefcase. "Okay," I murmured, watching him leave. The guilt should have come then, but it didn't. The second he was gone, I rushed upstairs, my hands shaking as I slipped into something new, something that made me feel wanted. The anticipation curled through me like a drug, making my heart race as I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. Travis's apartment was across town, small but clean, tucked away in a quiet complex. I knocked once before he opened the door, and the second our eyes met, it was like the world around us vanished. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. He pulled me inside, and the door shut behind us. My back hit the wall, and then his lips were on mine, his hands gripping my hips, pulling me flush against him. The hunger between us was almost unbearable, raw and desperate, like two people starving for something only the other could give. "You came," he murmured against my lips. I couldn't stay away. He groaned softly, his hands sliding beneath my dress, his fingers tracing slow, teasing patterns along my thighs. I gasped, my nails digging into his shoulders as he lifted me effortlessly, carrying me to the couch. It was everything I had been craving, everything I had been denying myself. Every touch, every kiss, every breathless moment between us set my skin on fire, sent me spiraling deeper into something I didn't understand, but didn't want to question. Hours passed in a haze of tangled sheets and whispered promises we had no business making. And when I finally lay beside him, my body exhausted but still aching for more, I knew there was no way this was going to be a one-time thing. "You're mine now," Travis murmured, his fingers trailing lazily over my skin. I should have denied it. I should have reminded him, and myself, that I belonged to someone else. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered back, "Yes." And in that moment, it felt true. I woke up tangled in sheets that weren't my own, my body still humming with the remnants of everything Travis and I had done the night before. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a soft glow over his bedroom, illuminating the mess we had made. Clothes strewn across the floor, the scent of him still lingering on my skin. For a moment, I allowed myself to lie there, eyes closed, breathing him in, pretending this was my life, pretending there were no consequences waiting for me on the other side of that door. But reality was persistent. My phone vibrated on the nightstand, pulling me back to the world I had momentarily escaped. My heart jumped into my throat as I reached for it, my fingers unsteady. It was Jason. "Where are you?" The message was short, simple, but I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest. I sat up slowly, careful not to wake Travis, though the movement made him shift beside me, his arm draped lazily over my waist, his body still warm from sleep. A dangerous comfort. I forced myself to slip out of bed, my feet hitting the cool floor as I gathered my clothes. "Leaving already?" Travis's voice was thick with sleep, laced with something that made my stomach twist. I turned, pulling my dress over my head. "I have to go." His eyes flicked to my phone, still in my hand. He didn't ask, didn't press, just watched me with that knowing gaze of his, like he had expected this. "You'll come back." It wasn't a question, and I hated that he was right. I didn't respond. I grabbed my purse, took one last look at him, and left. The drive home felt like a slow descent into something inevitable. My mind raced through excuses, explanations, anything to make what I had done seem less damning, but there was no justification that could make this right. When I pulled into the driveway, Jason's car was already there. My pulse spiked as I stepped out of the car, forcing my breathing to steady before unlocking the front door. Jason was in the kitchen, coffee in hand, his face unreadable. "Long night?" I hesitated, setting my purse down, hoping he wouldn't see the tremor in my fingers. "I went out for a drive. Needed to clear my head." His eyes studied me, lingering just a second too long. "And your phone?" My stomach tightened. "I left it in the car. Didn't think I'd be gone that long." Jason nodded slowly, his expression giving nothing away. "You missed dinner." I waited. Guilt sliced through me sharper than I expected. "I'm sorry." "Are you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. I wanted to be sorry. I wanted to regret what I had done, but deep down, part of me knew I didn't. That terrified me more than anything. Jason let out a slow breath, setting his mug down. Look, I don't know what's going on with you lately, but something's changed. You're distant, different. My pulse pounded in my ears. I've just been stressed. Work, life. Is it someone else? The question hit like a hammer to my chest. My vision blurred at the edges as I struggled to find an answer that wasn't a lie, but also wasn't the truth. Jason's jaw tightened. I don't know what's happening here, but I need you to be honest with me. If there's something I should know. I shook my head quickly. There's nothing. I just need time. He studied me for a moment longer, then nodded, as if accepting the answer, even though he didn't believe it. Okay. I exhaled slowly, the moment passing, but the weight of it lingered. Jason kissed my forehead, lingering there for a second too long. I love you. I closed my eyes. I love you too. And I wished, more than anything, that it wasn't a lie. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic sound of Jason's breathing beside me. My body still ached from Travis, my mind replaying every touch, every whispered promise, every reckless moment. My phone was on the nightstand, face down, the screen dark, but I knew if I picked it up, there would be a message waiting for me. I reached for it before I could stop myself. Travis. Couldn't sleep. Thinking about you. I hesitated, staring at the message. Every part of me knew I should ignore it, let it be the last time, let what happened stay in that small apartment across town. But the ache in me refused to fade. The craving for something raw and consuming gnawed at me. I typed back before I could think better of it. Me. I can't stop thinking about you either. The response was instant. Travis. Come over. Now. My breath caught. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, every part of me screaming that this was dangerous, reckless, irreversible. And yet, I found myself slipping out of bed, moving quietly, my heart hammering as I grabbed my keys. The drive felt both too long and too short. When I arrived, Travis was already waiting at the door, his expression unreadable. He didn't say a word as I stepped inside, as I pressed my body against his, as he kissed me like he had been waiting for this moment since the second I left. Time blurred again. It was heat, urgency, a desperate need neither of us could ignore. But as we lay there afterward, tangled in sheets, his fingers trailing over my skin, a thought crept in, one I couldn't shake. I was playing with fire, and sooner or later I was going to get burned. I pulled back, sitting up, reaching for my clothes. Travis watched me, propping himself up on one elbow. What's wrong? I shook my head, my mind racing. I don't know how much longer I can do this. He sat up, reaching for my wrist, his grip gentle but firm. Then don't leave. Stay. The words made my stomach twist, because part of me wanted to, but another part of me knew the truth. This wasn't sustainable. Sooner or later, Jason would figure it out, and when he did, everything would crumble. I pulled my hand away. I have to go. Travis exhaled, but he didn't argue. Will I see you again? I hesitated at the door, my fingers tightening around the knob. I don't know. I left before he could say anything else, the weight of my choices pressing down on me with every step. When I got home, Jason was still asleep, unaware, unsuspecting. And as I climbed back into bed beside him, I realized something terrifying. I had already lost myself in this, and there was no turning back now.